Hi, and welcome once again to Sector Readiness and Workforce Capacity Initiative online module for workforce planning and development. I'm Stacy Field, and I'll be leading you now through session 3, which is all about developing a workforce plan. So looking at prioritising and strategising for workforce development. We'll look at implementation, so looking at aspects of governing and monitoring a workforce plan, and looking at evaluation. So we're going to start by having a look at where we are in relation to the Workforce Council's Workforce Planning Framework. So in sessions 1 and 2, we have actually looked at the scope and engage, forecast and design, and understand and analyse phase. So at the end of the understand and analyse phase, we had identified the workforce issues that we needed to address in our workforce plan. We're going to move now into the prioritise and strategise phase, which is about identifying and agreeing on the priorities for the plan and the goals in relation to each of those priorities. And then from those goals, we actually begin to identify a range of unique strategies to achieve those goals. And we'll talk about having a range of responses at a range of levels, and then how we actually put that into a plan, and then what we do with it. So how do you prioritise workforce issues? It is important to prioritise workforce issues because it's better to do a few things really, really well than to stretch yourself too far and try to do too much and not achieve anything at all. So what the prioritisation step is all about is identifying criteria, transparent criteria that will enable you to bring the number of workforce issues that you need to address down to a manageable number. So in a workforce plan, you probably don't want to have more than 4 or 5 key priority areas that you need to address. That keeps the workforce plan focused. Drawing those issues down can develop or can generate some resistance, particularly for those people who are quite attached to addressing some issues over others. So being clear and having clear and transparent criteria can also help a change management process. Being able to explain why you've chosen the priority areas that you've chosen for the plan goes a long way in terms of bringing people along with you and keeping them engaged in the process. So some key things that can help to prioritise and can provide some of the criteria that you can use to bring the number of workforce issues down to a manageable number might be the strategic and business plans of your organisation. So the question that you ask there is, looking at the list of workforce issues that you've identified in the previous phase, what would our strategic plan say are the most important issues to address? What would our business plan as an organisation say are the most important to address? Other elements that you might want to look at is doing a risk assessment. What workforce issues pose the highest risk for our organisation? What workforce issues are the biggest risk if we don't address them, basically. You can also look at what do our funding agreements say are the highest priority issues for us to address? And then also, what do our organisational values and preferences tell us are the most important issues? So basically the criteria for prioritisation basically gives you an explanation as to which workforce issues you identify as the most important. So once you've prioritised and identified no more than 5 workforce issues, you can go over that if you wanted to, but I wouldn't recommend it. you then go into strategizing or building strategies around that. The first step of that is to develop a goal statement that relates to each of the priority areas that you've identified. So, for example, if you chose attraction and recruitment of staff as a priority area, you might develop a goal statement that is around attracting and recruiting a dynamic and flexible workforce. Or you might want to say you want to attract and recruit an experienced and professional workforce. Or you might want to attract and recruit an organisation that actually draws on the strengths of new graduates and experienced professionals to meet or to provide sustainability for the organisation. So a goal statement helps to define what it is that you're trying to achieve as an organisation. It's specific to your organisation, so that you can, measure your achievement of that goal later on. And also it helps you to identify a range of actions to achieve that goal. So from the examples that I used before, attracting a dynamic and flexible workforce might produce different strategies if you were trying to attract an experienced and professional workforce. So a dynamic and flexible workforce opens up strategies, for example, of trying to attract transient workforce, or a workforce that is more interested in working part-time, or is more open to a challenge. An experienced and professional workforce might be about attracting a workforce from postgraduate professionals or from other organisations. Not that I'm an advocate of poaching. But there's, you can see that a different goal statement will actually produce different actions to achieve that goal. What you also need to do is weigh up those actions, or the actions that you identify, against the likelihood that they will help you achieve the goal. So it's about assessing the value of those actions against the goal that they are aiming to achieve. And it's you actually can use an assessment of likelihood of achieving the outcome versus the inputs required to do that. So some of the actions that you identify might be high input but high outcome. So they're actually quite wise investments. There might be other actions that are low input, so they don't actually require a whole lot of resources, and they also help you to achieve your outcome. And those are the ones that we call them low-hanging fruit, or they're the easy actions to get up and running. So it's about not just going for your default favourite actions. It's not just about saying, we need to do this training, or we need to improve our induction as an organisation, or we need to make sure that we have an induction checklist. It might be looking at different ways of inducting staff. It might actually be looking at strategies like staff exchanges. So we can have a look here at some workforce development actions that are outside of the box. So it's about, thinking beyond what you've done before. Some of the things that you've done before might be fantastic and we wouldn't want you to throw those away. But if what you're doing isn't working, it's time to, think outside the square and start doing things differently. So when we think about things like role redesign and organisational restructures, that sort of strategy is about rethinking the activities that staff undertake. There might be ways of actually distributing the tasks across the organisation differently, and implementing, brand new roles to undertake different parts of what the organisation as a whole is trying to achieve. Utilising traineeships and student placements to grow your own workforce. So rather than looking at, traditional forms of attraction and recruitment, you can actually grow your own workforce from the inside through things like traineeships and student placements. When we look at other, forms of attraction, positioning an organisation as an employee of choice within your region or within your sector actually requires a whole lot of activities that are not only about promoting your organisation, but promoting your organisation as an employer. So it's not just about doing good things as an employer, but it's actually about promoting the fact that you do good things as an employer so that people want to come and work for you. And your current staff, particularly those that have stayed with you for a while, will have some really good ideas about what it is that's great about your organisation. Succession planning is primarily about retaining knowledge and experience within the organisation. In terms of knowledge management, there are a range of ways to do that. So succession planning is one of them in terms of handing that knowledge and those skills over to another person within the organisation or other people. But there are also other forms of knowledge management. For example, through recording processes or systems that are used by staff, recording in some way the knowledge that actually exists within the organisation. Recruitment strategies might also look different. They might be different to, putting the ad in the paper or putting it online. It might include things like pre-employment training, having open days for people who might be interested in working in your part of the community services sector. Retention strategies are primarily about creating conditions to keep valued staff. Again, your current staff will have ideas about, what encourages them to stay so that you can actually enhance those. Conditions and incentives are, unique to staff, so finding out what motivates them and, what makes them feel valued within your organisation is an important thing to find out. Skills development is what most people think about when they talk about workforce development. But skills development, as you can see, is just one aspect of achieving the workforce that you need. It's very much focused on the individual level of response, but it can be achieved through a range of methods, and they can be both formal and informal. And many really valuable methods of developing skills and knowledge within an organisation that they primarily rely and utilise the resources of the organisation itself. So that's things like developing a community of practice within your organisation, having a reflective learning circle, developing, mentoring and coaching culture within your organisation, even things like action research projects and investing some time in that can go a long way to encouraging staff to share and advance their knowledge. So they're just a few ideas about workforce development actions and strategies that you can undertake. There's a multitude of unique and wonderful ways that people develop their workforce, that organisations develop their workforce. So I would encourage you to search for those. The Workforce Council Workforce Innovation Awards, which are held annually, are actually a good source of information around innovative ways that organisations are developing their workforce across Queensland, and that's specific to health and community services too. So there are some really good examples. So once you have identified the priority areas, the desired outcomes that you want, and the proposed actions, you've pretty much got the fundamental elements of your workforce plan. So we'll talk a bit more about those elements right now. So the first element of the workforce plan we've talked about is the priority area. So what are the priority workforce issues for your plan? The next element is the desired outcome. So what is it you'd like to achieve in relation to each of the priority areas that you've identified within the scope and resources that you've got for the plan, for implementing the plan? So this ensures that, you know, you don't necessarily want to take on the world. You want to keep it realistic within the time that you have and the resources that you have. You want to look at the proposed actions, what are the actions and activities that you plan to undertake to get to your desired outcome. And we call them proposed actions because what you want to consider in this plan is that if it's going to go for 2 to 3 years, you want to ensure that you can undertake actions or opportunities that arise that you may not have thought about. But what that might mean is that if you take up one opportunity that you didn't anticipate, you might actually have to take one of the actions out of your plan, or it might become impossible to do one of those actions in your plan. So I guess calling them proposed actions means that this isn't set in stone, that the actions that you've identified, they can be a little bit flexible, they can be fluid. You don't want to play too much with amending the priority areas or the desired outcomes that you want to achieve. You actually want to stick to those because I guess they're the touchstones of your workforce plan. They're the ones that remain quite solid and keep you on track. So obviously, as with any kind of strategic plan or action plan, you want to include the timeline. So when will each strategy or action be implemented? So will it be triggered by something or will it be scheduled? Which things will you do first? Which things need to be done before other things? Who will take responsibility for certain parts of the workforce plan? What resources will need to be allocated? What will be required to undertake it? And then you also want to ensure that you have a part of your workforce plan that enables you to update where things are at. That will enable you to ensure that this is a living document, that there is some element to it that requires updating and reporting against what's in the plan. What a workforce plan could look like, it could be a table, and you can see those elements that I just mentioned in that table. It can look like a diagram, and formatting it as a diagram can be really useful in terms of engaging other people in what's included in the plan. So you can keep things at you don't want to put the whole. You keep things at a pretty superficial level. You don't want to put all of the information in there. People generally don't need that. You might want to include things to the action level, just to give people a picture of what it looks like. You can have a combination of both. You can have a report style document that's a little bit more descriptive in terms of the priority areas and the desired outcomes, and then sets out in a more structured way what the actions are. So there's a whole range of ways that it could look like, as long as those elements are in there. So once you've actually completed your plan, it's important to implement it, obviously. So the implement and monitor phase acknowledges that a plan is pretty much nothing if you don't do what's in it. And sometimes that can be quite difficult for people, just facilitating or understanding that shift from a planning phase to an implementation phase. So this is why implementation is actually a part of the workforce planning framework, because fundamentally without implementation, a plan means nothing. So implementing and monitoring means that it's about ensuring that the actions that are in the plan are embedded into people's work plans, that it's not simply added to, that somebody's name isn't just written beside something, that if it's a priority for the organisation, then it needs to be a priority within somebody's workload to get that action completed. And for that to be a priority in someone's workload, something else might have to come out Now, it doesn't mean that it has to be a priority within their workload forever. It might be a particular point in time that they actually have to focus on, a particular thing that's to do with the workforce plan. You also want to look at how you implement the plan through partnerships. So this means that you don't necessarily have to do it yourself. You can actually work through partnerships, to get parts of your plan done. So parts of your workforce plan might actually be done by people outside of your organisation. So beginning implementation as well also needs or requires the communication of the plan. So you need to be able to speak to the plan. People need to be able to see it, to understand what it means and where it's come from. Managing and monitoring the plan is actually about ensuring that you have clearly thought about and defined how the workforce plan is going to be governed. Who's going to be looking after it? Who's going to be responsible for it into the future? Who's going to monitor how the plan is going? And that is a very, very important factor in terms of keeping the plan alive. Reviewing and updating the plan is about ensuring that periodically whoever's governing the plan or whoever's responsible for the plan takes a step back and asks, is the plan on track? Are we achieving what we expected to achieve by now? Is there anything that's creating barriers to the plan being implemented? Is it still relevant? And tracking any updates or changes that are made to the plan. And again, that's about transparency and everybody involved being able to understand if there have been changes made to the plan, why have they been made, how have they been made, who have they been made by. So that's about implementing and monitoring. So as I said before, implementing the plan is actually about facilitating a shift from planning mode to implementation mode. And it's about ensuring that, people understand that it is a shift, so that it's not a shock to them that, you aren't generating ideas anymore, you're actually doing things. And I know that I'm labouring that point, but it's actually a very important thing and something that's constantly forgotten. One of the ways to facilitate a shift from planning to implementation is to celebrate the plan and the completion of the plan and the launching into implementation and doing now. So that creates a definite point in time where there is a shift in focus. Beginning implementation, as I said before, it's about embedding into work plans a way of gaining some momentum quickly for the plan and getting things started is to identify what the easy wins will be. What are the low-hanging fruit in your plan? So what are the things that are going to be easily accessible and something that will give you a result quite quickly? And what that will do is it shows people that you can achieve something with the plan and that it's actually a worthwhile activity. You've got something to show for it. So that very quickly, builds that momentum about, hey, this is a good thing. From the start as well, it's important, and even in developing planning or in the planning phase, it's important to identify what some of the pitfalls, challenges or blocks and barriers might be, and to, work with other stakeholders or work with some trusted colleagues to work through to identify what some of those pitfalls might be and to identify ways around them. And I guess this is about ensuring that there are no surprises down the track that are going to completely derail the plan. So that's just an important factor in terms of that beginning stage of implementation. So in relation to monitoring, reviewing and updating, I did already talk about identifying who is going to monitor and govern the workforce plan, what it is that they're going to undertake throughout that, what will be their tasks in doing that, When are they going to do it? So, is there going to be a workforce governance group that will meet regularly to discuss how the plan is going and any other issues that might have arisen? And how might they do that? Is that going to be through meetings? Is it going to be through documentation? Or are there other ways in your organisation? But it's just about working out those details and including them in the plan. So writing it down and so that you don't have to make it up later. Evaluating the plan is a very, very important phase, which is why it actually has a bubble of its own in our framework. It's one that's often forgotten and not thought about at all in the planning process, and it needs to be thought about up front in order to identify what data you need to collect throughout the implementation of the plan. So evaluating the plan, it does encompass evaluating the overall outcomes of the plan at the end of the plan period. So if your plan goes for 3 years, it's about evaluating the plan 3 years down the track. But it also encompasses measuring the performance of the plan and the outcomes of activities that are conducted throughout the plan. So in order to do that, in order to make it manageable, it's important to design an evaluation framework. And so an evaluation framework includes, what do we need to know about, what questions are we going to ask, what method will we use to evaluate it, who or what do we need to ask? Are we going to ask people? Are we going to look at documents and information that we already gather? And then how will we use that information? And when will we actually undertake evaluation tasks? And will that be triggered by the completion of activities, or will it be done periodically? So it's important to work that out from the start so that you don't get 3 years down the track and look back and say, well, what do we need to know? You want to be able to get 3 years down the track and say, here is all the information that we've got, but we just need to pull it together. So in order to do that, you actually need a framework that will help you pull that information together over time so that it's available when you need it. So that brings us to the end of the workforce planning framework and the end of our workforce planning sessions. So thank you. And please contact the Health and Community Services Workforce Council if you have any further questions or would like any assistance with any workforce planning or development activities for your organisation. Good luck and thank you.